Aleichem, everyone. It's very special to be back as part of this wonderful Vayichan initiative, uniting Jewish people all over the world in our effort to build the Beis HaMikdash together. Thank you to Rabbi Tarragon and to all the organizers. Today, the day that you're seeing this is the yahrzeit of the Ari HaKadosh, Shei Menachem Av. The Ari HaKadosh spent his life, his whole mission in the world was to reveal the inner reality of what's taking place beneath the surface. And one of the practices, one of the instructions, one of the most significant and most attainable of the Ari HaKadosh's directives is what's been codified as part of Nusach Hariyah in the beginning of Tefillah, and that Jews across the world, across the ages, have adopted as a significant practice in the way that we approach Tefillah and the way that we attune ourselves to draw close to Hashem. Is by beginning our davening by taking upon ourselves the mitzvah of Ahavta l'recha kamocha, of Hareini mekabel alai mitzvah saseh shel Ahavta l'recha kamocha. It binds us to the collective soul of the Jewish people. It binds us to the soul of every individual. It opens us up and helps us drive home the recognition that Avas Yisrael is Avas Hashem, and they're connected. So today, when we have this opportunity to daven together, to learn together, let's bind ourselves collectively and individually to the soul of every Jew in the world, the soul of every Jew who ever lived, and take upon ourselves the mitzvah of Ahavta l'recha kamocha. Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh, when he was a young boy, little Yisrael, had a very difficult time in Cheder. He was a big soul, and he had a tough time in that Misgaret, in that framework. The Melamed was always screaming, came in and gave them a hard time. The room was dirty and filthy, and they didn't have such resources and Sfarim, and very difficult, very challenging. This Melamed would always be giving everybody a hard time. Kids weren't always, kids could be difficult. Kids weren't always so nice to each other. And it was hard. He was a sensitive soul. Baal Shem Tov's father had instructed him to not be afraid of anything in the world other than Hashem, and more importantly, to always open himself and always love every single Jew unconditionally. But it was hard for him. And one day, things got too much to bear in Cheder, and the Baal Shem Tov, as a little child, ran out of Cheder and ran to the forest. And when he got there, he was wandering around, talking to Hashem, doing his thing, and he encountered an old man along the way. He didn't recognize him, but this old man called him by name, Yisrael, Yisrael. He called him by name. Hashem, as a little child, looked at this elderly man inquisitively, like, well, what does he want from me? What is he asking me? The elderly man looked at him and said, I bless you, Rabbi Yisrael, I bless you, little boy Yisrael, that you should have einayim lirot. You should have eyes to see, einayim liros. Before Yisrael was able to ask this old man that he met in the forest who he was and how he knew how he knew him, how he identified him, he turned around and wandered off and disappeared. A little while later, the young Yisrael came back to Cheder, came back to school, and when he walked into that dingy room with that Melamed who was berating him, he saw things very differently. Instead of seeing the darkness, he saw light. Instead of seeing kids who were being mean to each other, he saw kids who were, hadn't had a good breakfast at home and had compassion on them. And the Melamed who was difficult and bitter, he saw a person who was frustrated professionally, who had a difficult time personally, who was lacking Shalom Bayis, who always had dreams to be a Magid Shir somewhere and dreams to be a Talmid Chacham, and those were unfulfilled. And the young Baal Shem Tov, the budding tzaddik, saw good in them. It sparkled. He had einayim liros, he had eyes to see. The few minutes that we have together here today, I'd like to just share a couple of thoughts and anecdotes, maybe to direct ourselves and our attention, to attune ourselves to cultivating Ahavas Yisrael and accepting upon ourselves the mitzvah of Ahavta l'recha kamocha by trying to somehow see through those lenses of einayim liros, of eyes to see. In 1848, in the midst of a cholera outbreak across Europe that just wreaked havoc, suffering and untold thousands of deaths across Europe, Rabbi Yisrael Salanter, the great leader of the Jewish people and the founder of the Muslim movement, reacted with incredible fervor. He established a temporary hospital, and a couple of thousand people received services there in this temporary building. He was busy with doctors and other gedolim, other rabbanim, to establish policy that people should make sure that they're healthy, including making sure that Jews would even eat on Yom Kippur to make sure that they'd be of healthy bodies, that their body can resist the plague and safeguard their health. During that time, as nowadays, there were different rabbanim and different chachamim who were trying to figure out what's what and why, and to try to understand the mechanism of this magefa, of that suffering, of the cholera epidemic, to try to understand why the plague, to pin it on something, to try to understand how did this happen, why did this happen, to make a cheshbon nefesh, to try to figure out where we went wrong. But like what happens often, it's not where we went wrong, it's where others went wrong, where others were lacking. And some perhaps suggested it was a lack of tznius. Maybe it was the shaitels were too long. Maybe it was people weren't makbid on kashrus enough. Maybe it's because there was talking during chazaras hashatz, or there was too much meat at the smorgasbord, or whatever it may be. But everyone was trying to figure out a little bit to make sense of all of that suffering. Now, Mischel Salanter encountered one of these Jews who was, talking about the lack, the chisaron, and that he perceived in another community and perhaps in other leaders, and that it was because they weren't careful in that area of Shmiras HaMitzvos that we're all suffering. They're the ones who drilled the hole in the bottom of the boat. And Mischel Salanter pointed out that the Torah doesn't lay out punishment for Lashon Hara because what the person who's saying that Lashon Hara said isn't true. I mean, the definition of Lashon Hara is that it is true. It's not because of the sheker itself, but it's because of the bigger lie. The bigger sheker is that when we define a person based on what they're lacking or what they've done wrong, or based on something that they did where they fell short of their expectations or did something that wasn't good, I mean, we're defining them in a false way. Because more than we can identify as a person who's done something wrong or made a mistake, the truth of a person is everything good about them. And Mischel Salanter said to this person, if you're such a mumcha at figuring out what's going wrong, if you're such an expert at finding blemishes of what's lacking, so go to chutz lamachane, separate yourself, which is the punishment for speaking Lashon Hara, separate yourself from the rest of the community, and go find your own mumim, your own blemishes. Go stew in it yourself. Vayichan Bender is a chosir again leinu, great mashpia from Breslov, Yishalayim, Bali Masora of Breslov. That in his Diburei Emuna says like that separating from the Kehila as a way of atoning or fixing, rectifying Lashon Hara and finding bad in other people, that's not the goal. The goal is not to be separate. The goal is to be there, not to stew in one's juices either and point at one's own blemishes. But it's after we go through that process of spinning wheels and schlepping mud all over ourselves, of recognizing maybe what we're lacking, that critical person that's there spinning wheels at a certain point is going to come down to it and have compassion on himself, have rachmanas on himself, see good in himself, and find an nekuda tova in himself. And that's the goal. To find what's going right about his avodas Hashem, and begin to accept his place in the world, even if it comes down to it where the only thing I could find about myself is, Shelo asani goy, that Hashem created me in a way where I have the privilege and the opportunity and the challenge of keeping Torah and mitzvahs. Even if I'm not keeping those Torah and mitzvahs, even if I'm falling short in those Torah and mitzvahs, I'm in the ball game. I'm charged with the responsibility. I woke up this morning, I have another opportunity to try Shelo asani goy. There, I believe Yitzchak Bender says that compassion of seeing good in oneself, of accepting oneself, is the true meaning of accepting upon ourselves the mitzvahs aseh of ahavta l'reacha kamocha. It's so common when we, so to speak, judge ourselves and judge others that we cut ourselves slack in certain areas of Yiddishkeit. To a little bit older, a little bit more mature, we tend to perhaps cut ourselves some slack. But when it comes to the people around us, usually the people who were depending on us, the people that we're closest to, our family, our friends, our children specifically, maybe our significant others, our partners, we tend to be more exacting and perhaps a little bit more critical and a little bit more tough on them. Maybe it's because of subconsciously having higher expectations of wanting them to be bigger than us and to be more than us and to fulfill that which we lack. But ironically, tragically, that can undermine the whole process. And instead of elevating a person, can chas v'shalom cut them down and make them feel small. It's an old story. It's an old story. One of the most powerful relationships in Torah, the most powerful episodes in Torah expressing this in all of our history is at the end of Yaakov Avinu's life. Yaakov Avinu, the Bechir Shaba'avos, gathers his family around him in Parshas Vayichan. Now, after years of suffering, years of longing, years of distance and pain, of exile between Yaakov Avinu and Yosef HaTzadik, his beloved son Yosef, finally, after all of those tefillos that he couldn't even have imagined have come true in such a way, Yosef brings his children to meet their Saba, to meet their grandfather, to meet their Zaidi, Yaakov Avinu. It ought to have been the most beautiful Hallmark after-school special moment. It ought to have been like an incredible moment that would have put every family picture on Instagram to shame. Vayar Yisrael's B'nai Yosef. Yaakov Avinu sees, for the first time, not just his son Yosef, but Yosef's hemshech. He sees Yosef's children. He sees his grandchildren. Vayar Yisrael's B'nai Yosef. Tzvius Weinreb should be fond of quoting C.S. Lewis, the Christian theologian, that when we talk about our Father in heaven, really what we intend is our grandfather in heaven. Because, as fathers can be exacting, can be critical, fathers can be demanding, and we could disappoint our dad. Sometimes there's a little bit of like a vicarious living that can happen. There's a little bit of lachatz that can enter the equation. But when it comes for the grandfather, it's butterscotch candies, it's nachas, it's give you $1. So Weinreb said that when he became a grandfather, he understood that. You're looking for that kind Zaidi figure in Shamayim, who's forgiving and compassionate. But then Weinreb said, when Baruch Hashem, when he had great-grandchildren, he realized that, no, we're not thinking about a grandfather in heaven. We're thinking about an Elta Zaidi, a great-grandfather in heaven. A great-grandfather is just happy that he's alive in the world to see Nachas, to see great-grandchildren. Not interested, does he make the team? Is he doing well in school? Like, what's what they're doing, what they're not doing. The fact that you're alive and that I'm alive is enough for me. You imagine this moment where the Saba, where the Zaidi, Yosef, where Yosef brings his children to the Zaidi, to the Saba, to Yaakov Avinu, should be a butterscotch candy moment of, can't believe that we're finally able to be here together. Vayar Yisrael's B'nai Yosef, Vayomer, Mi Eile. Who are these people? What are they doing? Who are these kids? It says Rashi, Bikesh Levarcham, Yosef brings his children to his father and he says, bench my children, bless my children. V'nistalka Shechina, and the Shechina left him, the divine presence left him. L'fisha asid Yeravam va'achav latzeis Mephraim, because Yaakov Avinu saw down the road, he saw it with his Ruach HaKodesh, that down the road from Ephraim would come Yeravam and Achav. Yeravam was responsible for the division of Am Yisrael, the rebellion of the 10 tribes, state-sponsored Avodah Zarah. He saw that was going to come from his grandchildren. And he saw that Achav was going to come from Ephraim. Achav tried to murder Eliyahu Navi, busy with these Zevel, the worst of the worst. The whole Kerem Navot and Nevi'ei Baal. And Yehu from Menashe. He said, Mi Eile. Who are these people? Mehechan Eile Yatsu. Where did they come from? She'einan ru'uyin levracha, Rashi says. That Yaakov Avinu said they don't deserve a blessing. They don't deserve a bracha. Look what's going to come from them. Finally, Yosef is reunited with his father. Finally, entire generation has passed. And he brings his children there. He's married with a family. This long-awaited reunion is an absolute heartbreak. Yomer Yosef Laviv says to his father, these are my children. Asher nasan li elokim bazeh. These are my children. It's part of Hashem's plan. This is the continuation of the story, the promise from Avram to Yitzchak through you, through me. This is them. Vayomer kachem na'alai v'avarchem, like bless them. Says Reb Nosson, because Yaakov Avinu saw the rishus, he saw the evil, he saw the bad, he saw the Rishaim, he saw the bad that was going to come out from Ephraim and Menashe. Al Kain Tash Kocho, he says, he lost his strength. All the wind came out of his sails. The tires were deflated. Everything went dark. He saw the negative derivative of what was going to be coming, and he had no koach. He couldn't even dig deep for a bracha for his own grandchildren. Ad, says Reb Nosson, until he realized he has to just find an akudah tova. He has to find some good in them. and be malamed schus, and create a narrative of positivity that there has to be some positive that's coming from here also. Until Yosef called out, Bonayim, these are my children. Until he showed the star, the proof of the Erison, of the Ksuba, of the Yuchas, these are my kids. Until he showed the DNA test that I am the father. Until then, Yaakov Avinu was spinning wheels in negativity, focusing on what was going wrong and what was going to go wrong, and it was very wrong. What was going to come from Menashe, Achav, and Yehu was the worst that we possibly have in our history of what we did to ourselves. Yaakov Avinu was stuck there, broken there. The tires were stuck in that mud. Until Yosef says, Banayim, they're from me. There's an unconditional, inextricable kesher and relationship here. And they're important because of who they are, not because of what they do. Even for a Zayda, even for tzaddikim, even for the Bechir Shaba'avos, there are times when it's challenging to focus on the good, even on the people, or maybe especially in the people that were closest to it. The next pasuk right after, Ve'ene Yisrael kabdu mizokim. Yaakov Avinu's eyes became heavy. Lo yuchal os. He wasn't able to see, he became blind. Says the Beis Yisrael, the Ger Rebbe. It says, if the Ribono Shel Olam is saying to Yaakov Avinu, this is not why I gave you eyes. I gave you eyes to see good. You're not able to see good, you're going to see bad, you're not going to see it all. Ve'ene Yaakov kabdu mizokim, lo yuchal os. Because he wasn't able to see good, it says, if the Ribono Shel Olam said, you're not going to see good, you're not going to see it all, and he went blind. And then the bracha that comes from Yaakov Avinu is the bracha that's adopted for all of Klal Yisrael. Malach hagol l'sim korah, v'yid gularov b'kerev haaretz. V'yid gularov b'kerev haaretz. He blesses them. Yeah, v'yigesh l'sam elav. He draws them close. V'yishak lahem, v'yichabek lahem. He draws them close, he kisses them, he hugs them, he blesses them. V'yid gularov, a dog, a fish in the ocean, a fish in the sea, under the water. There's no ein hara that's on that fish. The symbols of kashrus of that fish can never be taken away. The fish is kosher, it's always kosher, no matter what happens to it. He draws them close, he hugs them, and he kisses them. He learns that the lesson, he was reminded of the lesson that Kedushas Yisrael, that worthiness and Achashivas by Hashem is inborn. Banayim. They're my children. They're deserving of love. Their identity, simply for who they are, is what defines their worthiness. So it means Yerushahim Avosenu. It's something which is passed down. And there's no ayin hara there. When Rav Nosson came to Breslov, in the early years that Rav Nosson was in Breslov, this is a Maisa, story that's brought in the Siach Sarfik Kodesh. There was a fire. There was a fire that ravaged a portion of the city, a portion of the shtetl. And after the fire, after the smoke was still billowing from the burnt homes, from the damage. Rav Nosson took a walk with some of the chev around, and he wanted to go check out the damage of this part of the neighborhood. And he came upon a house where the balabayis, where the owner of the house, was crying. But as he was crying, he was walking around. He writes, "Mechapes." He was walking around, sifting through the ashes, looking through the rubble to find like a piece of wood, something that wasn't destroyed, something that remained. And Rav Nosson turned to the people with him. He said, Do you see this person who's crying over what was lost? Right now, he's already holding by the rebuilding. He hasn't given up complete hope. It's true the house is burnt. It's filled with ash and smoke and water. It's a total mess, a total churban. But he's not miyayish. He's not giving up hope on finding something there, something that remains, some beam, some nail, something from the house that from that point he'll be able to rebuild. He said, this is what Rabbi Nachman was revealing in Torah Reish Pei Beis, the cornerstone of what Rabbi Nachman is bringing into the world of Azamr L'Elokai Ba'odi, that in every situation, in every person, in every place, there's a good point. And regardless of what's happening on the outside, no matter how much the house has burnt down, no matter what kind of achav, yehu, yeravim is taking place in a certain aspect of their life, beneath that surface, somewhere in the rubble, there's a good point. And if we're able to identify that good point, to search it out, to find out the good point in ourselves and in others, we change the reality. We completely shift the narrative from that person, whether it's ourselves or others, being defined as a rasha or defined as a sinner, being defined as a failure. And finding that point begins the rebuilding, the reconstruction toward the world of good. And that's the yesod of Azamra, of Rabbi Nachman's bringing to the world. More important than any other teaching, perhaps, that Rabbi Nachman's bringing to the world is focusing on what's going right and what remains. That after all is said and done, there's some point there from which we could begin the rebuilding. These are days where we're focused on Churban, where we're thinking about what's been lost, where we consecrate loss in Zeichel Churban in our lives. We're thinking about that during these days. But in the midst of all of this, we have to be very careful, perhaps, to also see what remains. La'olam lo zaza shechina mikotal maravi. La'olam lo zaza shechina mikotal maravi. The Shekhinah, the divine presence, never left that western wall. It's an outside wall. It's not even a wall of the temple, but it's an outside wall. And look how much yearning and tefillah and hope and optimism and brokenness and kesher to Hashem exists around that place, from that little piece that remained in the rubble from that which was burnt. Azamr la'lokai ba'odi, to call out, to sing out to Hashem with that which is left, that small point perhaps which is left, means recognizing the good. And Yaakov Avinu knew that. Yaakov Avinu knew that. He knew that there was problems with the brothers, that there was tension. He wasn't unaware of that. He wasn't unaware. Yaakov was no stranger to it. He saw that there was jealousy after Yosef described his dreams. And he sends Yosef down to meet his brothers and he says, Lech re'ei shlom achecha. Go check out what's happening. Lechna re'ei shlom achecha. Go, please, begs him, please go look and find what's happening, the good with your brothers, the shlom achecha. Meaning go check out what's what. Go hang out with them. Don't be separated from them. The Tifer Shlomo from Radamsk explains what Yaakov Avinu was telling Yosef was, Yosef, I know that it's not easy with them. I know that there's tension there. I know it's not so simple between brothers, between families, when there's a Technicolor dream code and there's competition between people. It's not always so simple. But he said, Yosef, please, I'm begging you, go. Lechna re'ei shlom achecha. Go find the good in your brothers. Go focus on what's going right. Not saying that there's not parts of the relationship that needs to be fixed, but don't define your relationship based around jealousy and competition and difficulty and hardship. Find what's going right and examine from that place. Begin the rebuilding from that place. Meir from Achdut explained that he told his Hasidim that every day they should make time for introspection. They should find time to think about what's going right in their avodas Hashem. One of the Hasidim was very busy with Torah, mitzvahs, and avodah, and he said he doesn't really have time for that. The Rebbe said, if you don't have time to have compassion on yourself, to find good in yourself, you won't be able to find good in others, and your entire avodas Hashem will be darkened without those eyes to see, the einayim liros, good in ourselves and others. Anyone who can't take pity on themselves and see good in themselves is incapable of seeing good in others. There's a phenomenal textbook of what it means to have einayim liros, what it means to be an Ohev Yisrael, what it means to be a Yid, that my dear friend, the teacher Surly Besser, just put out into a gifted the world. Stories of Reb David Shrenk, Zeichat Tzaddik L'Vracha. Reb David was a master at seeing good in others, a master of recognizing good in others. Just quickly, Kitzer Maisa. There were a couple of Bachrim from the yeshiva that Reb David was involved with in Adelphia, who were taking a bus from Lakewood to Brooklyn. And there was a fellow on the bus who overheard these two guys talking about how in the dorm they snuck in like a little TV into the dorm. They quickly went and snitched it out to the Rosh Yeshiva, to the Rebbe. The Rebbe has to know that the guys, what they're up to, is to know, like, in order to be mechanech them. Anyways, David's heard this information, that it's valuable information about the culture of a dorm and yeshiva, that there's something against the rules taking place. And David said to them, let me ask you a question. Do you know what Masechta they're learning? Do you know what's happening with them in Shir? Do you know the advancements that they're making in their tefillah or in their tikkun amidos? Do you know the strengths? Do you know the milas, the levels that they're achieving? I said, no, this is what I heard. So David said, if you don't know what's going on good with them, their strengths and where they're excelling and what's going right with them, then this is not something that you don't really know them. Then you haven't seen them. You haven't heard them. You don't know anything about them. There's something about understanding and recognizing that in order to fix, we have to begin with what's going right. That's a message during these days. We should have einayim liros, to have eyes to see that which is beneath the surface, that which is going good. Hashem should help us that in our hearts, should grant in our hearts, like the tefillah of the Rebbe Reb Melech, to see malas chavireinu, the good in our friends, the good in each other, the good in ourselves, the good in our children, the good in our community, the good in others, v'lo chesronam, and let the good in us connect with the good in others until all of the world is transformed with that compelling power of seeing good, of ayin tova, of love. We'll be zocheh to see the tuv Yerushalayim kol yimei chayenu, and Mirza Hashem get to the point we'll have the eyes of Hashem, of kulach yofa ra'ayosi mum ein ba'ach, to see that there's not just that there's a blemish and I'm going to be malamed schus on that blemish, not just that I'm going to work through it and strive to also see the good and identify the good, but to only see the good. That's the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu is looking at us. We should be zocha to urei betuv Yerushalayim kol yemei chayenu, and see the rebuilding of ourselves, of our relationships with Avos Yisrael and Eretz Hashem, Yerushalayim Abniyah.